Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Monday. I hope that you were able to get out this weekend and enjoy a little bit of the beautiful weather, and it looks like it's going to be nice all week. I'm Deborah Fazer-McMahon. I serve as Director of Faculty Development, and I'm thrilled to be presenting our final Lunch and Learn of this academic year. We have Adam Pellman, who's the director of our library, and Sarah Marsh, who's a faculty member in English, and they are going to be presenting on truth-finding and character education. So really thrilled to have them here, and please know that as part of the invitation, their presentation slides and additional resources are all linked, so if you're joining us via the live stream online, you can follow along there as well. And also for everyone here in person, you'll have all of these resources available via that Gmail calendar invite. So welcome, Adam and Sarah. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. So again, I'm Adam Pellman. I serve as director of the library and co-chair of our truth-finding program here at Seton Hill. We want to talk to you today about truth-finding and character education. These are two initiatives that we see being very closely intertwined. So we're going to talk about them in tandem, and then there will be some opportunities for reflection and discussion. So we want to start with a little bit of history about the truth-finding program here at Seton Hill. So I know some of you were around for its inception, some of you may not have been. So a little bit of the history here. The program was launched in 2021. It was named after Dr. Ava Fleischner. There was a grant from the Fleischner family to help provide funding for the program. And Dr. Fleischner was a longtime friend of Seton Hill. She was a member of the advisory board of our Holocaust Center for many years. And she was a scholar and teacher of the Holocaust and Jewish-Christian relations. And one of the focuses of her work was to engage in difficult questions and difficult truths. And a lot of that was centered around the role that Christians played in the Holocaust, or complicity in the Holocaust. And so the idea with this program is that there would be faculty and staff development toward curricular integration, and that would be in both LAC courses and courses in the major, and that we would also have programming for students. And the program, the truth-finding program, grew out of a very particular historical and political moment. So 2021, if you can remember back that far, we had seen many years where there was a rise of disinformation, and that was really exacerbated by social media. There was a decreased trust in kind of historically respected sources of factual information. There was we see continued growth in extreme partisanship on both ends of the political spectrum, both here in the US and abroad, and just an erosion of democratic institutions. And the other thing that's kind of core to this truth-finding program, as Jim Paharic reminded us at our recent guest speaker event, is that Dr. Fleischner reminded us that truth-finding requires moral commitments that are guided by our core values. So kind of the program grew out of a very particular moment, as I mentioned, but it's really more broadly aligned with a Seton Hill education, a liberal arts education. It aligns with the charism of the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill and with the Catholic intellectual tradition. So I've got our mission listed here, and I've also listed a number of the outcomes that were proposed for our students for this program. So I won't read them all off, but you can see a lot of these align very closely with various university learning objectives. A lot of them are highly relevant to information fluency or information literacy. And again, they grew out of that very particular historical and political moment. So you'll notice some of these, again, they mirror the language of the ULOs. A lot of these are more broadly applicable to what we want our students to get out of their time here at Seton Hill, like in general, right? You know, looking at multiple perspectives and worldviews, That's a kind of like a more general goal of an education here at Seton Hill. So when Sarah and I took over as co-chairs of the Truth Finding program in 2024, we had a lot of conversations about, what should the structure of this program look like? How can we use the original goals or outcomes of the program and build upon those and maybe make this a little broader to the Seton Hill education more generally. And so what we came up with was a framework that's really kind of two-pronged. So we want our students to search for the big T truth and the little t truth through the processes of inquiry here at Seton Hill. So the big T truth, what are those like really deep, enduring questions about what it means to be like a human person, right? And it's really rooted in the fundamental dignity of every person. Those are the kind of like the big questions that we want students to ask as part of their liberal arts education. And then there's also the little t truth, right? That's the kind of information fluency component, the everyday, information seeking, gathering data and gathering evidence, checking your sources for accuracy and reliability, building knowledge. So again, it's those two prongs. And so we can think about these certainly through like a broad liberal arts education lens, but we can also look at them through a disciplinary lens, and that's kind of what we hope to do today. That's kind of the current vision or framework that we have for this program. So, when you're thinking about your discipline, you might ask yourself, like what are the big questions that my discipline or my profession seeks to answer? And what are the methodologies that people in my discipline or profession use to kind of answer those big questions and also search for the little t truth, right? What are the methods that are used for that information seeking? And so what we came up with is a list of dispositions that we want to cultivate in our students here at Seton Hill. So you might think of these as, habits of mind, right? So again, thinking about research as a process of inquiry, it's an open-ended exploration where they're engaging in information and engaging with multiple worldviews, right? So seeking out multiplicity of perspectives as part of the whole fabric of the truth. Developing an open mind, right? When you're encountering information that's contrary to what you already believe, or if you're seeing conflicting perspectives. I know that's something that I really struggle with still. Using appropriate search tools and source evaluation techniques, discerning fact from opinion and analysis, developing the courage to speak the truth and then act upon it, right, through our mission to transform the world. And then, there's a metacognitive element to this as well. So we want our students to be aware that these dispositions require a lot of self-awareness about our own biases, and that they require ongoing and frequent self-evaluation.
Thank you, Adam, and thanks to you all for being here. So the other thing that has happened at Seton Hill in the last year is that we have won an institutional impact grant from the Educating Character Initiative at Wake Forest, and the work of the grant has helpfully come alongside the ongoing truth-finding program. And what Adam and I realized in conversations with Jim Paharic and with Sister Susan is that if truth-finding is the ideal of a Setonian education, the intellectual virtues, these sort of like habits of mind, these ways of comporting oneself in the face of questions, those are the methods of achieving that ideal. And part of the work we did with the character education grant was to define each of the Setonian pillars in the terms of the intellectual virtues, which are, I think, when sort of taken up out of a classroom or inquiry context and dropped down in other places of human life, they are continuous with moral virtues, right? The ways that we treat our fellow human beings. And as you know, those 4 pillars are welcoming, learning, celebrating, and serving. And I'm just going to say a little bit about each of these. Welcoming is a virtue that is rooted in hospitality, and that is much bigger and much deeper than just being nice to people who happen to come by. It is rooted in a belief in the fundamental dignity and therefore the equality of all human persons. And a Seatonian education welcomes all people into the process of inquiry, regardless of background, identity, belief, and y'all are here because of your commitment to that principle. The pillar of learning is fundamentally connected to the virtues of humility and of wisdom, right? Humility is the virtue of getting out of your own way long enough to see the sort of bigger capital T truth. And the hope, right, is that in engaging with questions over time in a humble way, that we can, over time, cultivate our judgment in such a way that we have access to that rare thing that we call wisdom, which is to see with, the clarity of almost a kind of divine perspective, the perfection with which God sees. Celebrating entails the virtue of gratitude, being grateful for other human beings in their fullness, not just when they're easy to love, right, but at all times. And also cultivating a sense of gratitude for suffering. It's a really kind of paradoxical idea to wrap the mind around, but the idea that it is through the obstacles, it is through the questions, it is through challenge that we are able to achieve a fullness of gratitude for human life and for the creation. And then finally, the pillar of serving, which entails phronesis or practical wisdom, which is the translation of moral insights into action in the world, right? And the idea is that by welcoming, learning, celebrating, we cultivate those inner resources that then impel us to go out into the world and serve other human beings on the margins of society, with the idea that we go to the margins not just for the sake of the margin, but to transform the center, which for all of us is the self, right? That we seek that kind of radical transformation through service to the least of these. So those are our 4 Seatonian pillars and some of the virtue language that we developed to kind of surround them. And so giving that framework a little bit more room to breathe today is the entire goal. So what we have done is we have put some questions for quiet reflection on your individual tables, and we would be so pleased if you would spend just 5 to 7 minutes reflecting in writing, and these are not going to be collected, so if you just want to make some notes, we're not checking these. You want to just make some notes for yourself, because once you have a little bit of time to reflect in writing privately, we're going to ask you to talk about some of your answers at the table. And here is the reason why. The dignity of the person is rooted in part through our capacity to think, our drive to ask questions, to wonder why, and each of us has chosen a discipline or profession that takes a particular kind of attitude or a particular kind of approach to that, asking why human process. And so these questions are an opportunity to reflect on the specificity of where your dignity comes from, right? We talk a lot about students needing community, and it is also true that professional staff and faculty need community around these particular virtues, and so today's conversation is meant to cultivate exactly that. So without further ado, I'll invite you to reflect on these 5 questions, which are printed out on the tables there, so please grab a copy And then we'll call you all back together in about 5 or 7 minutes. Thank you.
And I'll just add, as Deborah mentioned, this document is included in the link that was added to the calendar invite. So if you would rather type than write by hand, you're welcome to use the digital copy that's available in that folder.
right, friends. Adam is graciously going to go clean up after the water I just spilled. And what I'm going to do now is pivot and ask you to convene conversation at your individual tables about these particular 5 points. So any genuine insights, we'll start with those, move into a discussion of the moral demands of your discipline, and then it will be interesting to see if there are any commonalities at the tables or any differences. And then 4, we'll be sort of looking ahead to teaching students to be persons of character in your specific profession or discipline. And then we're going to ask one person at each table to be the scribe and write down the answers to each of these so that we can share them out. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and get started on those. Thank you.
Where was it?
Yeah. Hey, y'all, oh, sorry, that was loud. 2 more minutes, and then we'll bring it all together. All right, everybody. We only have about 15 or so minutes left, and I hate to interrupt your conversations, but we are gonna, I'm so sorry, I can tell people are like deep in it. Thank you so much. I mean, it's April. Who has time for this? I mean, thank you for being here. So Adam, what we'd like to do for the final step here is we would like to share some of what you found during your conversation today with the whole group. So Adam is, and we can stick to this program if that's useful. However, the expectation is that perhaps there are other insights that have arisen that don't really fit into this schema at all. So please just feel free to share what you learned from one another, and Adam will walk around with a microphone so that we can all share. Thank you.
Yes. Would anybody like to start off the group sharing? Any volunteers?
Hi, Joe Domensik from Theater and Dance. I'll do my best. Chime in if I miss anything. One of the things we talked about between nursing, science, theater, and music was that each one, when we think about the origins of them, is essentially going back to what it just means to be human, like going back innately, whether it's communicating, whether it's searching for an answer, whether it's taking care of someone. Each of our disciplines is a development of a very basic instinct. We talked about the nursing code of ethics and how you said this is really easy to answer the moral imperative because it's every line of the nursing code of ethics. And I was talking about in theater and music the impulse for telling stories, expressing things with music that can't be expressed with words. And then we were talking about how there's crossover. We were talking about stories in nursing and the responsibility. Then we got on this idea of the responsibility that comes with the power of stories and music and sharing stories about how when there are so many things like our kids, the lyrics of songs that they'll say that we think, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're singing that, or maybe I'm singing it. But just because it's catchy, you could try this yourself. Maybe you have at some point. Just read some of the lyrics you sung as a kid or that your kids. And so we talked about the responsibility that comes with that. Anything else? That's kind of where our conversation went, to the commonalities and the moral demands. I don't think we got to the others at the end, but it was a great conversation. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thanks. I really like what you said about the code of ethics. I think for many of our disciplines or professions, that certainly provides a lot of the guidance, that moral backbone to what we do.
So we talked a lot about kind of linking, I hate hearing myself in a microphone, that's so weird. We talked a lot about linking kind of a student's curiosity and being okay with not knowing everything to how they will learn and grow in the future. So we have science, math, and our student experience over here, and we kind of all linked that even though our disciplines aren't inherently connected. And so when a student comes here, a lot of times they don't want to admit that they're wrong. They have their pathway that they want moving forward, and so getting them to realize that mistakes are okay, that it's okay to not know everything, and kind of fostering that growing humility. We talked about balancing challenge and support, like how do you challenge students to want to learn something, support them along the way, but also get them to be curious and kind of think of things on their own. And then we also talked about letting students kind of be okay with multiple things being true at once. And that there are kind of different ways to look at things, and not everything is black and white. And a lot of times when students are really career focused and they want to go in that one specific direction, they've got to fulfill X, Y, and Z. They don't want to look at that kind of intersection of all of those things. And so then we very briefly started talking about ways that we could kind of bring this into a classroom and kind of designing things that inherently let them focus on their curiosity. And so we didn't really get too far into that, but do you guys have anything to add? Is that all right? Okay, I'll stop listening to myself on this mic now.
Yeah, I love all the points you made about not knowing the right answer or thinking of things in a very black and white way. When we were having our conversations about kind of our framework or vision for the truth-finding program, one of the ideas that came to the forefront was that higher education is distinctive from K through 12 in that in K through 12, at least nowadays, it seems like students are almost trained that their mindset is, I have to find the correct answer. But the search for truth in higher ed, that open-ended exploration, it's not necessarily about finding the one correct answer, right? It's about finding the truth and how that's different than finding the right answer, so to speak. Not that there aren't right answers in many cases. Anybody else want to share?
So one of the things that we had a lot of similar points to other groups, but one of the things we sort of had mentioned is we talked about a bit of that in many ways, although we have somewhat separate, we have social work, forensic science, literature and English and science, but in a way they've all kind of come under attack recently. And there's a lot of erosion of trust of other people's expertise and how we can't all be experts. We should know a little bit about each other's fields, but that we can't all do everything. And so, this erosion of trust and this erosion of value that many of our disciplines face in today's culture is difficult. And then we did not get to talking about how we would help students address that, which will be interesting.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, Deborah.
So our group had a great discussion. We also have, we have 3 language educators. We have communications, we have English, literature, and we have social work. A couple things that came up were our commitments to justice and to equality, and just kind of recognizing the dignity of the human person, like across all of those disciplines as central aspects. Also, something interesting that came up was some tensions within many of our disciplines around some hierarchies. So for example, in English, there's the tension between literature versus composition or the teaching of writing. And, this has been a challenge, especially in the American educational environment for many years. In modern languages, it's the same thing. It's between literature and culture versus the teaching of languages, like the basic learning of languages. And so helping part of it is also the ethics of where are we really investing our research and our time? Is it on helping our students with some of those basic goals that they have, or is it getting the top tier publication, or those kinds of things? And then another thing that we shared in all areas was this idea of kind of a cultural humility and a cultural self-awareness, or self-knowledge. So sometimes there's this idea of learning about the other or learning about the subject or the topic, and wanting to become an expert in that, but not recognizing that this is a relational dynamic, and I actually have to understand my own culture and my own perspective in order to be able to learn more fully about the other. And that's something that students in many of our disciplines really struggle with.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts they want to share? Something that maybe, again, grew out of your group discussion, or something you want to share from your personal reflections? Or Sarah, I don't know if you have anything you want to say in reaction to those comments.
I did want to ask, even if you didn't get to it with the conversations in the group, if there are any insights or reflections about encouraging students to be persons of character in their vocations, in their professional fields. We've been certainly talking about some elements of that already. Some of the questions we've been raising are precisely the kinds of things that you must encounter as a person of character. I wondered if there were any other important things to share. Yeah, Joe, thank you. And then we'll go back here.
The obvious. It just seems to me with the readings and the conversations and assignments, if you just simply say, how will this better the world, or how will this do, if you add a moral component, almost it seems too easy to just say that, but you can kind of just add it into any assignment, can't you? Have you considered this, or articulate how this would be better? I know that in our play selection committees, which we have every year, that's one of the things that comes up. What are we saying with this play? How does this benefit the community? Not just the students, but how does the message of this author impact the world?
Thank you, Joe. Christine, and then Laura.
Something that we talked briefly about in our group, and it sounds like this group touched on it, is just kind of the basic understanding of intellectual humility. And I know I bring to my first semester honors students readings about thinkers who have explored what that means, so that they see the not knowing as actually a habit of mind that leads to a more nuanced and deeper knowing. And so I think that's something that's fairly, we can invite it, but also help folks to understand that this is something people have thought about and explored, and it's actually a practice. It's not just a giving up of control. It's actually a way of it's a form of inquiry that can unite us across disciplines and also can help us to deepen our understanding of our own disciplines.
Thanks, Christine. Laura.
Thinking about number 4 and encouraging students to be persons of character, I think it's really important to help students understand that there's kind of a continuum between the choices they make in the classroom, whether it's something like responsible AI use or not using AI, and then the professionalism within the discipline, within the potential career that maybe goes along with the discipline, and then the larger ethics of just being a person, being a human in general.
Laura, thank you. That sort of dovetails into one quick thing I wanted to say, which is I've gotten really excited in the last week or so about the astronauts, and I felt I was trying to figure out why I felt so excited and so alive and so inspired by these 4 incredible people who went to space, and the huge team of people and researchers and all of the infrastructure that it took to get them there, which includes all of us because our tax dollars went to support that mission. I was trying to think about why I felt so moved by it, and what I realized was that it was an example of excellence in human beings, a bunch of them, not just one singular person, right, but an excellence, excellent teamwork, excellent communication, intelligence of all these kinds. And, it struck me that, we are also on a kind of spaceship here at Seton Hill, right? And we all, we have these different roles that we play, but what we are really seeking is to cultivate in students a kind of excellence. And because, our disciplines make certain kinds of demands on the person, learning a language, learning how to read a literary text, engaging with patients, performing a play, working in community with others, designing an experiment, right? All of the things that we do make particular demands on the person in relationship to the self and in relationship to others. And I think increasingly when I try to explain to students what a liberal education is for, right, I'm trying to show them that, like, no, it's not that you're going to have to know that, I don't know, Jane Austen published Sense and Sensibility in 1811, right? That discrete detail is not the thing that's important. But reading that novel is going to make certain sorts of demands on you, the person, demands on your intellect, demands on your time, demands on your discipline. And that difficulty is the thing that creates strength, right? This is why we put heavy weights in the gym, right? And so the difficult things that we're asking our students to do is a way of asking them to cultivate excellence so that they can, fly in space, whatever that means metaphorically for them in their vocation. So I wanted to thank you all because you are here out of an expression of excellence in your profession, a commitment to pedagogy, a commitment to our precious students who are navigating a very challenging time in human history. And it is a great blessing to be with you all, and Adam, to work with you. And I do think we want to close with a couple of resources we want to make you aware of that have grown out of the Truth Finding program and character education that you may wish to take with you into class. Thank you all for being here. Adam, go ahead.
So we just want to encourage you all to, continue reflecting on these questions. And these are questions that you can ask your students and have your students explore as well. And certainly, continue to explore them with your faculty and professional staff colleagues. Another resource that we have available that was included in that folder that's linked in the calendar invite is this virtue assessment. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to maybe speak a little bit about.
Yeah, so just quickly, these are some questions for self-reflection that were designed by Emma Zuder, who is a graduate of Seton Hill and came back to campus this year to serve as the program assistant for the grant from ECI. And Emma designed what I think is just a wonderful exercise in self-assessment that you are welcome to use and adapt. The one important caveat for a virtue self-assessment is that this is meant to be a vehicle for reflection and conversation, not a grade or sort of judgment, right? Like we're not giving students A's or B's or F's on their virtues. These are meant to be a vehicle for inward reflection as an expression of the idea that, like, that's the place where this work really happens in a venue that we have control over, right? The only thing that I can control is my response, Viktor Frankl. So if you think this could be useful to you, you're very welcome to use it. Please do credit Emma with the composition of the document. She worked very hard on this, and I know she'd be pleased to know it was being used. And with that, I think we'll thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, just grateful for you all.
Okay, just a couple of announcements. There are a bunch of to-go boxes, so if anyone would like to take a little bit of food, please feel free to do so. And we will once again be having lunch and learns in the fall, September, October, November. So I hope that you come back and that you've enjoyed those sessions this year. So thanks. Have a wonderful rest of the spring term.
And can we thank Deborah for organizing all of these all year long?